Hi, welcome to Anaprime Recap. You are a prince who cannot hear or speak, but you will still brave the world in search of a new journey to become king. We are in the anime, Usama ranking, episodes 1, 2 and 3. In a prosperous and large kingdom, a little boy runs around in search of fun and adventure. As he walks across the plains away from the population, he is surprised by a dark and mysterious creature that quickly asks what the boy's name is, but all he gets as an answer are just some inaudible sounds. At this moment he understands that this child cannot speak, and then he discovers that the boy is also deaf, and is able to dialogue with him, using his tentacles as a kind of mouth. The creature begins to get angry with the boy and without thinking much, decides to rob him by asking for the little boy's clothes. He then gives his clothes without any importance, being in a way even happy with that whole situation. The monster then tells him that the next day, the boy should go back to that same place and bring more expensive clothes with him. After all, with this he could sell them and make some money. The little boy agrees to the deal and leaves contentedly for home. As he passes through town, the villagers laugh at him for walking freely in only his underwear, carrying a big smile on his face. They say that this is Bojji, the first prince. They point out again that he is not even able to hear or speak, and cannot even handle a child's sword. The next day, the dark being wonders if the boy has really come and hypothesizes that he might even be plotting an ambush to arrest him for the robbery. But after a few seconds, he realizes that the boy has indeed returned bringing valuable new clothes. The creature notices that the little boy is enveloped by a great happiness even though he knows that his costumes would be caught. This is when he understands that because he cannot hear or speak, the townspeople do not interact with him. And his joy was exactly because he now had someone to talk to. Incredibly, the dark being somehow manages to understand what the little prince was saying with his clumsy speech. In the end he understands that the boy will bring more clothes the next day, after which the boy hands over his clothes and goes away happy. The next morning, Bojji returns again to his meeting place. He is overcome with an incredible happiness on seeing the dark being. The creature exudes for a moment a trace of joy, but quickly restrains himself and takes the boy's clothes with him. On this particular day, the two end up talking more than usual. The little boy says that he lives in the great castle, being the prince of the kingdom, saying that one day he will be a great king. The little prince gets a little irritated by this and contests him by gesturing that he will indeed be able to command a kingdom. Then the creature appreciates his great motivation and says no more. The boy goes back to his home, but that day the creature followed him. When he arrives in town he is again seen by everyone without his clothes. The children are curious about this and go to talk to him, but as usual they get no answer. As a result, everyone starts to laugh at him, and Bojji, embarrassed by the situation, runs away from the place straight to his castle. When he arrives at his residence he is met by Queen Hilling, mother of the second Daida prince, by Sandio, Minister of Justice, and three other members of the Big Four group, Domas, the swordsman, Apis, the king's spear, and finally, Dorsch, the queen's shield. The woman asks him why he is not wearing his clothes, and through the interpreter the Majesty understands that the boy was only joking, so she becomes enraged with his attitude, saying that he is tarnishing the dignity of the royal family, as well as disturbing the harmony of the kingdom, and may even lose his head for such offensive acts. After her harsh words, the woman realizes that the boy is shocked by it all. She even wonders if he can really hear her, but without giving the slightest importance leaves the castle accompanied by her protectors. At the end, Domas informs the boy through gestures that he should put on new clothes and go to meet his father, and the boy just agrees and goes to his room. The creature accompanies him all the way, and as it watches the prince in his chambers, it realizes that the little boy was crying and then rushes off to meet his father. The dark being moving through the castle loses sight of the boy, and while trying to look for him is found by Bebin, the snake tamer, being the last member of the Big Four group. The knight identifies him as a member of the Shadow Clan, a group of assassins who had been decimated. Bojji arrives at the room of his father, King Bosse, the 7th ranked king. At this point, we are taken to a brief flashback. A long time ago, the village in the region suffered from a gigantic horde of monsters that intended to destroy and eliminate all who lived there. The giant fights and destroys all the enemy hordes and gains the respect of all the villagers. That was the beginning of Bosse's reign. Back in the present, the king questions his son about walking around the city without clothes, asking if he has been robbed or suffered a threat from someone, but his real concern is for his strength. The little boy is the fruit of his relationship with the first queen, she being his mother. Bosse asks Domas, the greatest swordsman and also the little boy's teacher, to intensify the training with his apprentice, because the boy is not getting any results so far. Somewhere in the castle, the creature takes off at high speed through the corridors to escape its pursuer, but ends up being cornered. The warrior Bebin intends to eliminate it. After all, it belonged to a clan of criminals and its mission could be to end the king's life. The dark being throws a knife in his direction, piercing the man's hand. Taking advantage of the situation, the monster hides in the shadows, but the swordsman summons his serpents to track him wherever he is. The next morning, Bojji goes on with his practical lessons, but he still hasn't mastered the art of the sword very well. Domas is furious with himself, thinking that he is not being a good mentor to his student. He strikes a blow with his wooden stick at some test objects because he feels uncomfortable with the situation. Just then, Daida, the second prince, arrives at the training site and asks if he can train with him, but the teacher says that the two are not yet at the same level. When the boy hears this, he challenges his mentor to a training session. The swordsman is apprehensive about the idea as he has heard that the boy even defeated the captain of the Order of Bojji, becoming overconfident after his victory. Domas then accepts the proposal with the intention of teaching the boy a lesson in morality. Both wield their wooden sticks and Daida quickly runs toward his adversary, delivering a strong blow. The teacher feels the intensity in the boy's eyes, and so the two begin a violent exchange of attacks. Bojji gets excited about all that action, but in the end the famous swordsman manages to get the victory in the training, being impressed by Daida's skills. The little boy, seeing the gleam in his guardian's eyes, picks up a wooden stick and stands in front of his brother, challenging him to a training match. In the castle, the creature continues to hide in the shadows, but then discovers that Bojji will face his brother. Everyone in the residence is informed of the battle and quickly heads off to watch the duel. One of the guards remembers that one day the prince was surrounded by snakes, and without carrying any weapons he was attacked by them, but incredibly managed to dodge all their attacks. When the fight starts, Daida attacks him, but his brother dodges very easily and escapes the various attacks he was receiving. In the end, he unbelievably manages to find a loophole and hits the second prince with a light blow to his head, winning the fight quietly. We are again taken to the past, where the shadow beings suffered from an intense persecution engineered by the Light Clan. They were hunted down and punished mercilessly. In the midst of this chaos, two fugitives manage to get away from the turmoil, a mother and her son Kage. Hiding behind a rock, she urges the little one to run as fast as possible into the toxic forest while she fights off her pursuers. And so he obeys. The mother ends up being discovered with a magic light that clears the whole place. However, the little one was also seen running in the distance. She tries to contest Geslin, the man behind all this plan, of why she was doing that, but he doesn't care to answer. At that moment several soldiers bring in their spears, several members of the Shadow Clan. Kage further on comes across two people, and his mother continues in an arduous battle against the spearmen. Making use of her bladed dagger, she manages to defeat some opponents, but upon discovering that her son had been found, she gets desperate and goes on a furious attack towards Geslin. However, at that instant she is brutally pierced and eliminated by her enemies. In the vicinity of that place, the soldiers search for the other shadow that had escaped, but come across only two people, the little Countess, Poise, and her guardian. The men ask if they have seen a child of the Shadow Clan, but the girl says no. The commander approaches with his servants, and Kage, who was hiding inside the little girl's teddy bear, begins to cry non-stop at the sight of his lifeless mother. The little girl begins to cry louder to disguise the crying of the little shadow, so her protector asks the guards to leave that place because they are scaring the child with that frightening scene. As they leave, the little girl's guardian tells Kage that they are at King Bo's service, and that if he wants to survive he must go to another kingdom. The little shadow goes on his way now alone, with only a wooden toy his mother had given him for his birthday. When he gets to the city, he goes through horrible situations, feeling cold, hungry, and lonely in that place. One day he tries to exchange his only precious item for an apple. After all, he couldn't stand the hunger. However, when the owner of the stall sees this action, she calls him a thief, and the poor shadow is beaten and thrown into a dirty alley in the outskirts. One night, already without hope, the shadow is surprised by a man who gives him a plate of leftover food, and taking advantage of the little creature, he takes him for his own. So from that day on, Kage begins to do various household chores for the man, receiving only food scraps as payment, living under threats and insults. After a few days, the two are in front of a house. The man asks the little boy to open the lock for him, and in his innocence, ends up obeying his order. Inside, they find a chest with several gold coins in it, and taking advantage of the little shadow's ability, the man starts his string of robberies in several residences. One day, returning home after losing some of his money in bets, he notices a wanted poster with a good reward, at which point he discovers that it is the shadow who was running away, and without a second thought informs the soldiers of the little shadow's location. Kage was sleeping in his house and for a brief moment recalls the teachings of his dead mother, where she said that they belonged to a clan of murderers, mercilessly eliminate children, men or women, and for acting in this way their deaths might one day even be acceptable. The son is afraid of these words as he would not agree to eliminate anyone. Back to reality, He is cornered by several guards who enter his house to capture him, but the shadow quickly manages to escape through the window. Some time passes and he returns to the subject's house, but the man orders him to get out of there because the little creature was no longer of any use to him. Even though he was rejected, Kage kept following the guy wherever he went. After all, he was the only person he could maintain a bond of friendship with. One day while drinking in a bar, the man gets into a fight and ends up being stabbed with a knife, dying right there. When the little shadow saw this scene, he was extremely saddened by what had happened, and went back to living alone and lonely in the world. He ended up passing through several cities, and with this his personality began to change, becoming a professional thief in order to survive, until one day he found a child playing alone. That was the sad story of Kage's past, who since childhood has been through the most horrible and tense situations, making him who he is today, a murderer who steals and trusts no one. Back in the present, the shadow is secretly watching the duel between Bojji and his brother Daida. He gets so excited about the boy's likely victory that he begins to root for the boy. However, Domas interrupts the fight for a moment and says something to the prince through sign language. The little boy is displeased and saddened by what he has just discovered, but then resumes the fight. Bojji now doesn't dodge, trying to physically defend himself from the attacks, but this doesn't work. His brother tells him that he played dirty all this time, and with that he was managing to dodge. Angry about it all, Daida hits his brother with several furious blows using his wooden stick. Kage tries to stop the duel. After all, it was over the line, but before he can take action, Appease throws a spear at the scene, confirming that the fight is over and the second prince is the winner. The boy leaves the place and tells his guardian that he used all his strength so that his brother could not recover, so he goes to his mother's quarters to tell her the good news. Bojji is rushed to the infirmary, where he receives the necessary medicine and care, and is now resting in his room. Kage is under the boy's bed and realizes that he has just fallen and crawled to a sword with the intention of wielding it, but only managed to knock it over. The shadow throws a gold coin at the boy and reveals his presence, saying that he was the true champion and no matter what happens from now on, he promises to always stay by the little prince's side to protect him. One night, Kage was under Bojji's bed when he noticed someone entering his room. The person approached his bed and used magic to heal his wounds. When the shadow sees this, it calms down and decides to go for a walk around the castle, but at that moment it is found again by Bebin and his snakes, who surround him with the intention of eliminating him. The next morning, everyone is surprised with the tragic news that the king has died. His minister informs everyone that the heir and next king will be Bojji. With this declaration, everyone is surprised by a strange smoke coming out of the patriarch's mouth. That reddish mist takes shape and a demon appears on top of the bed, points his finger towards the first prince and smiles, disappearing soon after. Daida is enraged by the news, and confronts the magical mirror about who the eventual king will be. The creature replies that it will be him and that he shouldn't worry because his plan is proceeding in the way he prepared. At the ceremony of the presentation of the new king, the minister declares Daida, the second prince, as the new successor to Bosse. Then we are taken to a flashback of an event that occurred the night before after the reading of the will. The queen tears up the declaration of the former king and tells everyone in the room that Bojji was in no condition to assume the throne. She proposes a vote to decide if everyone agrees. The first prince wins 2 votes and his brother Daida 5. Daida is then declared the new king, and the protagonist rushes out of the ceremony site. In the castle dungeon, Kage is locked up. With no options, he cuts off part of his body to free himself from an iron hook, but as he exits the prison cell again, he is surrounded by Bebin and his snakes. Later, the man goes to the first prince, draws a figure that resembles the shadow and tells the boy that the critter went away on an adventure and never wanted to see him again. The boy is surprised because he remembers the words the monster had said to him before. Unhappy with this, he goes to the prison, passes through narrow and hidden paths until he finds a gigantic snake. That is a subordinate being of the snake handler, Bebin. The creature tells the boy that it cannot help him, but asserts that his friend is safe and no harm has been done to him, only that he has been ordered by the handler to go on a journey. Later, Appease, who had voted in favor of Bojji, comes across Bebin, who had orders from the new king Daida to eliminate those who were against his reign in the vote. The spearman discovers that these were orders from the new king. Understanding this, he sets out on a new journey to ensure that Prince Bojji takes the throne once and for all. In the castle, Daida wonders what he is going to do with his brother, and even thinks about exiling him, but his mother does not agree with this, because he is still a child and will need an education to develop better. At the window of his room, Bojji admires the view while thinking about all the recent events. He has an idea and goes out towards the queen's room. He tells her that he wants to start a new adventure alone, but Hilling replies that he is very fragile and wouldn't know how to handle himself with no support, because he couldn't speak or hear anyone. The boy just sheds some tears and rushes off to his room. not caring about the lesson he was lectured. He starts packing his suitcase to leave on his journey, but as he leaves his room he realizes that he was being kept in by the guard by order of the Empress. He then decides to make a kind of rope with the sheets that were in his room, after which he begins to descend, and at that moment the queen enters his room and looking out the window is terrified by the situation. One of the servants pulls the boy back, but he insists on continuing his descent, causing one of the restraints to snap. Hilling gets desperate and in an unintentional act throws herself out of the window to get the Bojji but is held back by her guard. The prince hits his head during the fall and falls unconscious to the ground. The woman immediately runs to him and at that moment concentrates all her energy, performing her healing magic, being the one responsible for having healed him the night he was injured. Bojji wakes up soon after and she ends up fainting because she has used too much of her power. Immediately the Empress is taken to her room to rest. That night, lying in her chambers, she remembers her past with the boy, when she tried several times to get closer to the prince when she arrived at the castle, but he didn't talk to anyone, just kept watching insects and playing alone. One day, he was bitten by a snake that was already quite injured. The new queen looking at that ran and kicked the snake away, but the boy cried when he saw the creature being attacked. At that instant she used for the first time in front of Bojji her healing magic, completely recovering the animal. After the event the two became closer and always talked, but everything changed with the birth of the new Prince Dida. The queen became more severe with the young Bojji, the one who once had so much affection. Back in the present, Hilling agrees to the idea of the boy going out on his journey, but he will have to be accompanied by Domas, his teacher and swordsman, and by Hokuro, a soldier who understands sign language. She also explains that the destination will be her parents' home and upon arriving there, he must pay homage and return to the castle. Bojji hearing this thanks the queen with a kiss on her cheek. And so the little prince begins his first journey, leaving with a huge smile on his face. The queen at that moment has a terrible feeling that she will never see Bojji or her son Dida again. So guys, what do you think might happen at the beginning of this new adventure of the little prince? And the Shadow Kage, what really happened to him? So, what did you think of this anime? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like it and subscribe for more anime recaps. See you next time.